Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Today's video kicks off with a classic neighbor dilemma, the battle over noise in a shared space. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Our neighbor told us to wear slippers because our footsteps annoy them. I, 33-year-old female, bought a house with my husband, 34-year-old male, in May of this year. It's a townhome on the edge of our city, and we have neighbors on one side, but the house on the other side is currently empty. Our next-door neighbors seem nice enough. We have only ever talked to them either when we're picking up packages or when they come to complain about noise. For context, the first weekend we had the house, we decided to have some friends over to build furniture on a Sunday, and then tried again the next week, again on Sunday. As we were building things, one of our neighbors came over to ask us not to do construction on Sunday because of the legal quiet hours. This is not true, as we were building inside of our house, which is allowed on your own property on Sundays where we live. I was annoyed, but we decided that we would accommodate them and bake them cookies as an apology. Things seemed to be okay after that, and then my husband was breaking ice cubes from the trays on a Sunday a couple months later and banged it all of 3 to 4 times on the countertop. Next thing I know, our neighbor is run over and is demanding we not build. I didn't say anything but was annoyed because since it wasn't even a minute before he came over, not wanting to fight, we put up soundproofing in our living room in case our TV's loud and generally avoid making sound on Sundays now. It feels a bit like we're walking on eggshells in our own home. Then the other day I was up trying to get to sleep around midnight and their TV was blasting so loud that we could hear it in our bedroom. I've heard their TV and music through the walls before, but generally brush it off since it was during the day. This time it was genuinely too late to be reasonable and was actually breaking the law regarding quiet hours. I talked with my husband and we chose to wait to say anything until we saw them in passing. Today, my husband picked up some packages from their place and mentioned the noise from the other night. He was told by our neighbor that the walls between our houses were very thin and they actually are even annoyed by us walking around in our own home. Their recommended solution was that we should wear slippers all the time. My husband thinks this is a good solution, but he wears house slippers all the time, so it's not a big change for him. I personally don't like wearing house slippers, and in my experience, these do very little to stop the sound of footsteps anyway, and am hesitant to do so just to accommodate something that's a normal part of living so close to people. It also is annoying to me that I feel like we're doing things to accommodate them, not making any noise on Sundays, putting up soundproofing, when this is our space and we should be able to walk around and cook when we want. Either way, we would invite them over for dinner at some point to smooth things over and establish a better relationship. You have crappy neighbors. Be respectful, but don't change your whole life for people who have no regard for the noise they create for you. Also, if they're the ones actually breaking the ordinances, why wouldn't you call and report them if they're being this much of an a-hole? Why are you continuing to cater to bad neighbors? And our second story. When management plays stupid games, they win stupid prizes. Context: I used to work at a Kroger deli when I was 19. This would have been 2009. I think I made it 6 months there before they forced me out. This specific Kroger had the bakery, the fried chicken station, and the deli under one section. In this store, we had a 3-tiered management system for hourlies. There was your department lead, the supervisor, and the manager. The way it's supposed to work is that supervisors and managers report any sort of problems with the hourlies to the department lead and they take it up with them unless it's something serious. So that way, if either the manager or supervisor are confused about a certain procedure, the lead can explain it to them without the hourly getting needlessly harassed. So I worked second shift and I mostly maintained the fried chicken area because I was the only one on second shift who actually enjoyed doing it. Closing down the department started between 9 and 9:30 and took around 3.5 hours. It would take closer to an hour and a half if the morning shifters would do their closing routines for the shift change, but they didn't, and we get left with a F-load of extra work and a F-load of dishes. Didn't really bother me. I was young and the overtime pay was welcome. Didn't really do anything else with my time anyways. Now some bonus context. Kroger's unionized, and they had this, if you work over a certain amount of hours in a 6-week period, you're immediately full-time with benefits, and they wanted as little full-time employees as possible. So normally I'd get weeks where I only work one day because of the extra 3 hours we end up being there. This particular set of weeks, we had 2 people quit, and the newbies brought in to replace them were fired. One called off because she got her wisdom teeth removed, and they fired her for that. Shameless. So I landed myself in a precarious position where I was about to be given full-time, but they really didn't want me to. So my manager pulls me aside and says, "Hey, you guys got to stop messing around back there. You take way too long to close, and we're starting to get corporate breathing down our necks." After explaining our situation and how we literally do almost all of morning shift's work throughout the day, I was told that if I couldn't get the work done on time, then I wouldn't be working here. Now, this is a big no-no for 2 reasons. One, as stated above, manager and supervisor are not supposed to interact with hourlies, as they generally have no idea what our job entails. I've been written up for not filling empty slots of the packaged cold chicken items when none were made for me by the morning shift. They took 8 hours to properly prepare. Reason 2 is that you do not threaten your employees, especially the ones who comply maliciously. 10 p.m. is my due designated out time. The chicken station worker is the last out because cleaning a rotisserie oven is a big fat B, but even still, the other 2 stations don't finish up until 11:30ish. After we close at 9 and I reveal to my cohorts that I've been instructed to leave at 10, lest I get full-time and the wrath of management, the other 2 start to complain about having to finish my work when I intercept them with, "No, those aren't your responsibilities. After I leave, it's morning shift's problem. They can complain to the manager if they have a problem with how I leave it." And that's exactly how it goes. Manager comes down to me telling me about morning shift's complaints about the condition of the kitchen, asking me why it was left like that, to which I explained that my newly defined curfew that he had issued caused me to miss a few things. I was written up, and I kept doing it and kept getting written up until getting fired for completely unrelated reasons. I would start a whole new 6-week rotation and still leave exactly at 10 p.m. Kitchen a effing mess, same excuse every time. Even though he personally told me not to leave until the kitchen was clean again, I left at 10 p.m. I complied too hard that it became a no takesies backsies situation. I really thought the end would be something like, "You want me out at 10 p.m. and you want the kitchen clean? Sorry, customers, no more chicken after 7 p.m. You also should have clarified that you were being ordered to clean the equipment as required on a day late in the week where it made you full-time, and made sure the union rep knew about it." And our last story. Steal my firewood? Enjoy your surprise. Back in the early 90s, my family lived in a lower middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people worked hard, kept to themselves, and tried to help each other out when they could. Our closest neighbors were a poor but incredibly kind family with 5 kids. They didn't have much, but they never let that stop them from being friendly and generous. Unfortunately, the house down the street belonged to a different breed of neighbor. These people were, for lack of a better term, absolute a-holes. They had constant police visits for noise violations and whatever other illegal nonsense they got up to. Their kids were feral, running wild in the neighborhood, throwing rocks at passing cars and causing general chaos. If something went missing or got vandalized, everyone in the area knew exactly where to look. Now the good neighbors had a problem. Their house didn't have proper heating installed, so when winter rolled around, the father had to rely on firewood to keep his family warm. He worked long hours, and some friends from his job were kind enough to help him out by supplying extra wood so his family wouldn't freeze. But as the temperatures dropped and the snow piled up, he started noticing something strange. Every night, a few logs from his neatly stacked wood pile would disappear. At first, he thought maybe he was mistaken, maybe his kids had grabbed more than usual, or maybe he'd underestimated how much he was using. But after a week of consistently missing firewood, he knew for sure someone was stealing it. And he had a pretty good idea of who the culprit was. One evening after work, he decided to take the direct approach. He walked over to the a-hole neighbor's house and knocked on the door. When they answered, he got straight to the point. "I think someone's been taking my firewood. Any idea about that?" Predictably, they denied everything. "Nope, not us. Don't know what you're talking about." The father knew arguing wasn't going to get him anywhere. They weren't about to admit to stealing, and legally he had no way to prove it. So instead of wasting his breath, he just nodded and went back home. That's when he came up with a plan. The next day, he went through his woodpile and found the nicest, most tempting-looking log he could. It was the kind of log someone would immediately go for. Solid, just the right size, perfect for a fireplace. Then he drilled a hole into it, just big enough to fit a quarter stick of dynamite left over from a fireworks stash earlier that year. Carefully, he inserted the explosive, sealed the hole back up with wood glue and sawdust, and placed the log right at the top of his pile, just waiting to be taken. Sure enough, by morning, it was gone. The father said nothing. He waited. Days passed, then a week. Then, early one morning, the entire neighborhood was jolted awake by a massive explosion. Boom! The father sat up in bed, smirking to himself. He looked outside and saw exactly what he expected. The a-hole neighbor's kids running out of the house screaming, "Our fireplace just exploded!" When my dad looked out the window, he saw what he could only describe as something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. A perfectly round, blackened hole gaped in their chimney, and soot was scattered all over their lawn. The good thing is that no one was hurt. Well, except for their massive egos. After that, the firewood theft stopped immediately. The a-hole neighbors never mentioned the explosion. What were they going to say? "Hey, we stole your wood and it blew up our fireplace." Yeah, not likely. For the rest of the winter, they seemed to have figured out their own heating situation because they sure as hell never stole from the father again. And as for the rest of the neighborhood, no one felt the least bit bad for them. And of course, they couldn't say anything about it. What were they going to do? Walk up and be like, "Hey, so, hypothetically speaking, if someone were to say, steal some firewood from you, and if that wood just so happened to explode and nearly send us all to the afterlife, would you maybe possibly know why that happened?" Nah, they had to eat that L in silence. And you know the rest of the neighborhood was laughing behind their backs while pretending to be shocked and concerned. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.